All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur with you guys. It's a lovely and tragic day. Progressives are on the precipice of folding on nearly everything in negotiations. We'll get to that a little bit later. But we have an amazing guest for you guys, Anna.
Yes, well, I'm very excited for this conversation. So joining us now is Anita Hill, author of Believing: Our 30-Year Journey to End Gender Violence. Anita Hill, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be on your program.
I'm looking forward to this conversation, not only to discuss what you've done in your career, what you've been through, but also to kind of focus on where we are as a nation today in regard to issues pertaining to gender violence, sexual harassment, sexual assault, all of those issues. I want to start though by asking about the aftermath of your testimony regarding the sexual harassment by now Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. You took a tremendous risk in speaking out, and I'm sure there were consequences for that I'd like you to share with the audience.
Well, yes, absolutely. There were consequences after I left Washington. I think most people just assume that when I left Washington after testifying, my life resumed as normal, but absolutely it did not. I was threatened, my job was threatened, my family was threatened, friends lost jobs because of it. I think one of the things that we need to learn from these situations is that there is a before and there's a during and there's an after testimony, and the after testimony can go on for weeks and months and years in some cases, and that's exactly what happened to me. Nevertheless, what I'm here to say now is that I have survived that. I've moved on and actually have developed a real understanding about what 1991 meant. And how it's still a reflection of some of the very bad behavior and bad outcomes and bad processes that exist in our country today.
So, Professor Hill, let me start with an apology. Now, when I was watching those hearings, and I watched it meticulously back in '91, I was 21 years old and a Republican, and I didn't believe you. And I want to apologize for that. Now, it had no effect, even my roommates didn't agree. And I influenced no one, and I was not a talk show host. But it's personal to me, it's personal to you. So I just wanted to say that on behalf of all of the people who were wrong. And I want to ask a question related to that. How much did you expect people like me and others, much more relevant people, to not believe you, and what made you come forward at that time anyway?
Well, what made me come forward? Well, first of all, let me say thank you for that apology. Your apology is accepted. But let me just be very clear. The process was set up for you not to believe me. And that's what happens in many of these instances. It's set up, it's stacked against believing anyone coming forward. And that was certainly the case in 1991. Did I expect more? I don't know that I expected more, but I felt that it was my responsibility to provide information to the Senate Judiciary Committee. The Judiciary Committee was deciding on a nominee that would serve on the Supreme Court, our country's highest court, for a lifetime. And that's not only important to me as a lawyer, but it's important to me as an individual who lives in this country, who can benefit or can be deeply harmed by the wrong person making decisions like those that suggest he is above the law, which was the case in terms of his behavior toward me.
As you talk about decisions being made, I can't help but think about the various contexts in which panels of men or legislators consisting mostly of men make decisions that overwhelmingly impact the lives of women. In your case, you had the Senate Judiciary Committee that was composed of men. President Joe Biden at the time was the chair of that committee, and the line of questioning lacked any and all empathy. More importantly, lacked any perspective on what it's like to be a woman in the workplace. In the case of Texas, you have mostly male legislators voting in favor of a law now that essentially bans abortion and violates reproductive rights in that state. And there's really no consideration for, first of all, what the lived experiences are for women and how these decisions negatively impact women's lives. Do you feel that things have really changed in the last 30 years in that regard?
Well, I think a number of things have changed, but let me just say this. I think with regard to any legislation, one of the things that we have to address in this country is the value that people put on women in their lives and the impact that those pieces of legislation can possibly have to something like the basic safety. And that was what was going on in Washington in 1991. And as you suggested, it's still going on today. Legislators, largely men or largely male-led legislative actions, are influenced by people's experiences and lack of empathy and lack of willingness to understand how what they decide impacts our lives. And in the case of questions around sexual harassment, reproductive rights, sexual assault, really imperils the lives of women and many others, non-binary folks, and in many cases some men as well. And so I think there's this real need for us to have representation that reflects the experiences that we all have. One of the great examples of the court being sort of out of step was called out by Ruth Bader Ginsburg on a number of times when she said, you, the members of the court who were in the majority in some cases in which she dissented, you do not understand the lives of women. And I think it goes one step further. You don't value the lives of women, because if you valued the lives of women, the Senate Judiciary Committee would have taken time to understand sexual harassment in 1991. They would have taken time to understand sexual assault in 2018 when Christine Blasey Ford testified.
So, Professor Hill, I'm going to go back to this one last time. I really want to talk about the general thesis that you're laying out in the book, but when I look back at what they did wrong, it's hard for me as an outside observer to pinpoint what it is, and I'm sure that you have opinions on that. So how Republicans treated you is obvious, but what do you think Senator Biden back then should have done differently that could have given you a fair hearing?
Well, just as I was referring to, he could have called expert witnesses to talk about sexual harassment. There were witnesses waiting to be called who were experts in sexual harassment, who I didn't know, but who could have informed the committee, could have informed the American public, could have helped them understand how the problem works in the workplace and why people don't come forward. Yet what Biden allowed was me to be accused of lying because I didn't come forward sooner, when that is in fact the norm, and experts could have told him that. The other flaw was, of course, that he failed to call other witnesses who had experienced the same behavior with Clarence Thomas, witnesses that I didn't know, but who were available and ready to be called on. They were not. Their statements were entered into the record in a written document. But of course, we know that there's nothing like having witnesses appear in person. I just want to be clear that I talk about 1991 in the book, and I talk about it not because, I'm stuck in 1991. I'm talking about it because it's a reflection of what's going on in the country today, not only in public spaces, but also in private corporations where people come forward and they're not given any attention, they're not valued. They may not even have their claim investigated, just as it was not investigated. Christine Blasey Ford's wasn't investigated. We have a problem, and I learned this very early on, that 1991 wasn't just about sexual harassment in the workplace. I learned very early on from an incest survivor that what he experienced, what he tried to come forward to tell his parents about his abusive relative, was very much like what I experienced in 1991. But I've also heard from people who are survivors of intimate partner violence. I've heard from people who are rape and sexual assault survivors. The problem really is bigger than sexual harassment in the workplace. It's about bullying in schools. 34% of middle school children are cyberbullied, whether from homophobia, racism, or misogyny, trolling, and other kinds of behavior that exists that really imperil the lives of individuals of all ages. And 1991 opened a conversation. We have moved beyond 1991 in some ways in terms of public awareness, but the behavior is still going on, and the processes that are meant to protect us are not working.
Real quick follow-up. I know that he took forever to apologize to you, but eventually now President Biden did apologize. Did he ever explain to you or anyone else why he never called those witnesses?
I don't have an explanation for that. But what I really want today in 2021, 30 years later, is more than an apology to me. I really want a leader, whether it's a leader in the White House today, tomorrow, in the next election. I want a leader that really understands the depth of this problem, the breadth of it in this country, the whole group of behaviors that I'm calling gender-based violence, and the harm that it is causing individuals, causing their families, causing their communities, causing institutions. And I want a leader that's going to commit to doing something about the problem. We've got a lot going for us now. We have people who are aware. We have people like you who have changed their minds and are now open to understanding this better. But we have to have leadership to make the change that will ultimately change the process that we put people into and allow more people to step forward and perhaps even reduce the amount of behavior that is going on today.
It's interesting that you mentioned having strong leaders who are actually willing to do something, because when you really put everything into context, we're currently living in this political age where legislation that is favored by the vast majority of Americans across the political aisle doesn't get passed because we don't have good leadership. We have lawmakers who are motivated by their self-interest, by their financial interests, by political expediency, all of that stuff. And so when you think about economic policy, for instance, something that should be far easier for these lawmakers to pass, considering the popularity of a more robust social safety net, they fail time and time again. And typically they pay lip service to the issues that we're talking about right now during this interview, issues regarding gender violence, racial discrimination. A good example is what happened in the aftermath of the Black Lives Matter protests last summer. Lots of lip service paid by Democratic lawmakers in the form of Black Lives Matter murals, but behind the scenes, essentially allowing any effort to reform policing to just kind of fall by the wayside. And so what do you think, for those who want to do something, what do you think is the best path forward to really bring about change, to push our lawmakers to be the leaders that they claimed they wanted to be when they were running in their elections?
Well, we have to push on these issues. I mean, in the 2020 election, the issue of gender-based violence very rarely even came up. It came up a couple of times when now President Biden was asked about an apology. But it did not come up in terms of asking any of the candidates clearly what they would do to respond to. So we've got to, as a voting population, as a populace, to press the issues ourselves. We've got to expect that anyone who is leading this country will be concerned about the statistics. So 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted in college when they go to college, and the number is greater for those women who don't go to college. We need to be concerned about the fact that 1 in 4 women will be a victim of intimate partner abuse. We need to be concerned about the 1 in 6 men or boys who are sexually assaulted. And that, to me, is the public crisis. What we tend to have happen is that people don't understand that this is part of their responsibility, that taking care of the safety and well-being of individuals are part of a leader's responsibility. But what happens instead is that we try to personalize the problem, and we put the entire burden of eliminating it on the victims themselves. The victims who are less likely to have control of the processes, that are less likely to be defining and shaping the culture within our organizations. And what that ends up with is that we keep perpetuating it and passing it on from generation to generation. And I'm saying that it's time for this generation, my generation, those of us who are in control, to stop it, to make a change, to make a commitment, and bring in survivors and victims to help find the solutions.
Final question for me is regarding the type of people who tend to get promoted, fail upward, if you will, into these leadership positions. And there are countless examples to give you. I mean, you referenced Brett Kavanaugh earlier. Brett Kavanaugh, who infamously had to be part of a hearing because he was accused of attempted rape when he was younger, is now a Supreme Court justice. You also have Donald Trump, who was still voted in as president of the United States after he was caught on tape bragging about physically assaulting women and grabbing them by their genitals. And so when you look at the values of society as a whole, do you ever feel despair? I mean, how do you have the mental strength necessary to kind of get past that and continue fighting for a better society that doesn't actually promote these people into leadership positions?
Well, I'm encouraged because people still come forward. People still speak out. We just need to all join and put that energy together, that we need to affect change. One of the ways that we can think about it is that we have many people now across the political whole spectrum who are saying that they believe deeply in democracy. But just if we take a very few of those of the Democrats who say they believe in democracy, this problem of gender-based violence is a mark, and not a good mark. It's a bad mark on our democracy. When you think about the institutions that have really been corrupted by this problem, our courts, our legislative body, our three most out of the last 5 presidents have been accused of sexual misconduct. Look at what's going on in our military. Mm-hmm. This problem is a threat to our democracy, and we need to address it as such and stop thinking about it as a personal problem that we alone as victims and survivors have to endure or find our own solutions for.
All right, and my last question, Professor Hill, is when I talk to other guests, I sometimes talk about how we're still, in a sense, in the post-Civil War era, that we never fully recovered, we never got to full equality, and history will look back and say, oh yes, this was still squarely in the post-Civil War era for America. And I feel the same way about the 19th Amendment. And I'm wondering if you feel that it would be helpful to discuss it in that context so people understand, well, just 100 years ago, almost quite literally, women didn't even have the right to vote, let alone the assumptions that went along with how women would be treated at home, in their families, workplace, and that we're still working through that process. And that maybe if we frame it that way, people can begin to understand that search for freedom and equality that you're talking about.
Well, I think that's a wonderful way to begin to open the conversation. As a matter of fact, I did so in the book to talk about what does universal freedom and universal rights mean if, in fact, any of those rights can be taken away by violent behavior. Then it's absolutely meaningless to say that we have the right to vote or that we have the right to an education or a right to work if, in fact, that right can be taken away, it can be altered, it can be reduced by abusive behavior in the institutions that we find ourselves. So I think you're absolutely right. But we have to go not just look at the 19th Amendment, we've got to also consider how even within the 19th Amendment, race was an issue. That there was, that the suffrage movement was in many cases exclusive of women of color, and that the fight for women's suffrage really almost completely fell apart because of racism within the ranks. So it's a good place to start. But I think starting with the 19th Amendment but that's the concept of what universal suffrage and universal rights actually mean in this country if we can't protect people from abuse.
Professor Anita Hill, thank you so much for joining us. And everyone, please check out her book, Believing: Our 30-Year Journey to End Gender Violence. Thank you again. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you both.
Thanks.
All right, well, we're gonna take a brief break, but when we come back, we're gonna give you the latest on the ongoing negotiations regarding the budget reconciliation bill, what has been cut, what will remain. We'll give you those details and more.
During the social break here, I'm gonna read some of your comments. But first, I wanna thank the people who just joined, James R. Nelson and Edith Williams. Hit the join button below on YouTube and became Young Turks members. That's how we do this show and you guys make it possible. All right, speaking of which, let's go to the members. Dragonfire Mathematician X writes in, Anita Hill can tell you who Joe Biden really is. She knows more than most people, believe me. Well, it certainly seems that way. And Biden is a guy who is willing to accommodate power. That explains almost his entire career and his reason for existing, pretty much. And so when power is in a bad place, he accommodates that. When it's in a good place, very, very rarely, he accommodates that. So we're in the middle of that as we speak, and we're gonna do that in the next section and show you. What's the antimatter writes in, that's why we need at least 12 weeks of family leave and build back better. That's certainly true. It looks like you are not going to get that. That's almost certain now. We'll explain again next segment. Eclectic Miscellanea says it's depressing how little things have changed in Washington in 30 years. Trump got elected president. Kavanaugh was appointed to the Supreme Court. Biden got elected president, despite credible accusation against all of them. The arc of the moral universe is long, but Professor Hill's courage has helped move our society in the right direction. Yes, oftentimes it is very, very long, far too long. Yes, we're moving in the right direction, but yes, at a glacial speed. Joy writes in, we have leaders who refuse to pass protections because they are abusers. Well, certainly a lot of them are, and that would certainly explain some of the motivations. Mickey C. the Silver Dragon writes in, Anita Hill continues to have the same honesty, integrity, and strength she had 30 years ago. I admired her then, and I still admire her today. When I remember parts of the hearing, I still go into a rage. I mean, imagine how she feels. She has an amusing anecdote in the book you should check out about waiting for Biden's apology, what her and her husband would do. So there's some fun things in the book too, and it's a quick read. So Euro Lino writes in on Twitch, just Anita and a heart emoji, which a lot of us share. CJ Harbich says resubbed or has resubbed for 4 months now, and we appreciate that. Woman, man, camera, TV. Writes in, already funny. 9 months of these Bezos bucks and my Twitch babies here. So question, who's babysitting? Or by now, I think we need a Twitch daycare, LOL. That is LOL indeed. I wish we can get you childcare in this provision, even for your Twitch baby. Back on TYT as we shuffle papers back and forth. Cenk and Anna with you guys, and you're about to get depressed. So that's my fair warning to you. Now let's tell you about the awful state of negotiations.
Corporate Democrats have managed to chop up the budget reconciliation bill into something that's essentially unrecognizable, with cuts to paid family leave and 2 years of free community college completely being taken out of the bill. But there's more. Now they're considering doing away with Medicare expansion as well. And to be quite honest with you, all of this is predictable when you think about this system we're living under and how incentives and disincentives work. With that said, let me give you the latest details from Politico. Advocates and lobbyists said that a plan to expand Medicare with dental, vision, and hearing benefits for tens of millions of seniors, as well as a pitch to guarantee paid family and medical leave to all US workers, is now in danger of getting cut from the bill entirely. Let me just repeat that last word, because some people tend to have a difficult time understanding what that means. Cut from the bill entirely. Not, oh, maybe we'll cut a little bit of the funding. No, cut from the bill entirely, meaning that that Medicare expansion would cease to exist in the final bill. Now, the party had originally pushed for scaled down versions of all its priorities, including temporary expansions of Medicaid, Medicare benefits, and Obamacare subsidies, after resistance from centrists in the House and Senate had forced the cutting of more than $1 trillion from the package. But cutting that $1 trillion from the package apparently wasn't good enough for corporate Democrats like Senator Joe Manchin or Senator Kyrsten Sinema. Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer have said that they want a deal by the end of the week. However, with all of these cuts, all of these concessions to the corporatist wing of the party, we still don't have a commitment from the likes of Manchin or Sinema. The proposed new Medicare benefits have always been vulnerable, writes Politico, given a wave of lobbying against them from the healthcare industry. Those lobbying against the Sanders-backed expansion include private insurance companies and dentists, whose precious profits would take a hit if more seniors enrolled in traditional Medicare and didn't have to buy supplemental private plans to cover their dentures, hearing aids, and glasses. So again, Biden, let me just be very clear on this, okay? Biden has not used any sticks. He has not threatened any type of consequences or punishment toward Manchin or Sinema. All he's done is passed out carrots. Manchin, I'm gonna give your wife the job that she wants within the federal government. Manchin, I'm gonna give you all the concessions you want. And Manchin, along with Sinema, has succeeded in completely destroying this piece of legislation. But while it might be easy to blame Manchin and Sinema, and believe me, there's a lot of blame to go around, I think that really the heart of this issue is the insane weakness and cowardice that we saw from Joe Biden. The real question is, what are progressives planning on doing? And now, Cenk, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so don't get us wrong. It's about to get way worse. Anna's got more details on parts they're taking out, and they're pretty much gutting the entire thing. So hold on for more devastating details. So look, the bill is so gutted at this point that if I was advising the progressives, I would tell them to vote no.
Yeah, same.
So because at some point, half a loaf isn't.
It's not even half a loaf.
Guys, look, that's the proverbial saying that people put out there. But when you look at the details, for progressives, it's almost no loaf at all. The rest of it is just corporate gobbledygook. And so it'll make it look like half the loaf, but they've really taken almost everything we wanted out of the bill. So then why vote yes? And the answer is because you don't want to get yelled at. And that's a really, really bad answer. So there's, oh, well, Democratic unity. Well, Manchin and Sinema don't seem to care about Democratic unity at all.
They also don't seem to care about getting yelled at by their own constituents.
Yeah, they don't care at all. So, and look, there's a reason for that. It's not because they're more courageous. It's because their source of power comes from corporate cash. And their corporate donors have told them, we don't want any of those progressive positions. That affects our taxes, and we don't want to pay for any of it. So Manchin at one point in the Democratic caucus looked at Bernie Sanders and the rest of the caucus and said, I am happy to have zero in this bill. And he made a hand motion apparently and basically said, kill the bill, I don't care, because my donors have told me to kill the goddamn bill if you need to. But if you're not gonna kill it, make sure there's barely anything in it. And so then if you're gonna draw the line like that, progressives also have to draw the line. Otherwise, just as a matter of simple negotiations, there's no ands, ifs, or buts about this. The progressives, if they do not draw the line, will get steamrolled.
That's right.
And that's what we're definitely in the middle of right now.
Right, look, the precedent thus far has been that progressives will get pressured and cave into the demands of the corporate Democrats.
Yep.
That is the precedent. Right now, for the first time, progressives have a bloc that could actually flex power. Now, corporate Democrats are used to the precedent. They do not believe that progressives would really flex their power once push comes to shove. And to be sure, there's gonna be a tremendous amount of pressure for progressives to play ball. And yes, I think that Pramila Jayapal is gonna have an incredibly difficult time keeping her caucus together on this issue, right? But with that said, though, we don't need every single progressive in the progressive caucus to be unified in response to this. We just need enough progressives to block the bipartisan infrastructure bill and refuse to vote in favor of this bill, of the budget reconciliation bill, unless it actually has the provisions that matter. Based on what we're reading today, it will not have the provisions that matter. It will not have Medicare expansion, despite the fact that Senator Bernie Sanders, chair of the Senate Budget Committee, claims that he won't stand for it. It will absolutely be included. But as the negotiations stand today, Biden's like, whatever you want, Manchin, I'll cut it, right? As long as you vote in favor of it. And even with these concessions, Manchin is still not committed to voting in favor of it. I'm sorry, the bipartisan infrastructure bill is garbage. It privatizes public infrastructure. We don't want it. Okay, I don't care about its passage. In fact, I would very much like it to not pass. The reconciliation bill, as it stands today, with all those cuts, doesn't go nearly far enough. Half a loaf, it's not even a quarter of a loaf. They've cut out all the important provisions. There's more. So if we're not gonna get anything in return for privatizing public infrastructure, I'm sorry, they need to defeat both bills, period. Yes, they're gonna get a lot of negative commentary from the corporate media, but it's far better than passing both pieces of legislation that don't do nearly enough to improve people's lives, and then sit through the corporate media along with corporate Democrats telling us over and over again how successful they are, how unprecedented this is, how much it's going to improve people's lives, when in reality it's gonna do the opposite. Okay? Privatizing public infrastructure is gonna be a complete and utter disaster. It is nothing more than a way of, again, redistributing wealth from the bottom to the top, because you have corporations who are gonna manage public infrastructure that's now been privatized, and they're gonna implement all sorts of tolls and fees. It's gonna become more expensive for American workers to get around. That's what the outcome of that bill is gonna be at the end of the day. Let's just keep it real.
So now, this is super important, guys. If the progressives wait till the so-called deal is announced, then they say they're gonna vote no, then they will get all of the blame. You have to do what Manchin and Sinema are doing now. You have to say no now, not later. So that is why, look, I love to give them credit when they deserve it, and at different parts of this, they have greatly deserved the credit. You have to be open-minded, and saying one size fits all makes no sense. Either I hate progressive leadership, I love progressive leadership. No, you have to use your mind and use your judgment. So when they said, no, we will not vote for the corporate bipartisan bill, without first voting for this bill, that was great, and we gave them all the credit in the world. That is correct negotiation, and look, it's kept us in the ball game. But now when Jayapal leaves a meeting with President Biden, and Biden says, I'm gonna gut most of this stuff, and she does nothing but overflowing praise for Biden. I read that a couple days ago, and I thought, we're screwed. Well, and then every part of them, including progressive leadership, has not clearly delineated what is a red line for them. So for example, they said no climate, no deal. We talked about it on the Power Hour with Nina Turner last week. Ed Markey seemed to be drawing a line in the sand. Now all of a sudden, that line has disappeared. And there is no line in the sand. If there's no line in the sand for progressives, they will lose on every single issue.
In fact,
this is the fact.
In fact, regarding the climate provisions, already the most important provision is on the chopping block. Let's go to graphic 5 here. Senator Manchin has told the White House that he strongly opposes the clean electricity program. As a result, White House staffers are now rewriting the legislation without that climate provision and are trying to cobble together a mix of other policies that could also cut emissions. By the way, Senator Kyrsten Sinema didn't want to raise taxes on corporations, and guess what? That's been cut out of the bill as one of the major pay-fors. So no tax increases on corporations. You know, we're hearing a bunch of nonsense from Democratic lawmakers about like, oh, maybe we'll replace it with some sort of wealth tax. You're not gonna replace it with any kind of tax increase on the rich. Let's just keep it real. I'm tired of them pretending as if, no, but this is a priority of ours. We're gonna make sure. No, you have lawmakers, you have the President of the United States who ran on reversing Trump's tax cuts for the rich, and now something as simple as increasing corporate taxes, not back to 35% as they were prior to the Trump era taxes, but raising it to even 25%, not gonna do it, sorry, because precious Sinema isn't gonna have it.
Yeah, guys, if you hear any promise, including from progressives, that, oh, don't worry, Biden gave us a promise to come back to this later, understand that that's a joke.
It's a lie.
Okay,
it's worse than a joke, it's a lie.
Yeah, if they actually believe that, then I feel even more sorry, because that means you're the suckers at the table. Nobody's coming back to any of this. This is it. If they can't put it in this bill, they're not gonna be able to pass a standalone bill. On which planet do you live? No, that means you don't understand politics if you say something as childish as that. Okay, nobody's going back to a goddamn thing, okay? Now, it's so easy to call out 1,000 of these things. Well, Manchin, you say you're worried about adding to the deficit. Well, great, it's not gonna add deficit because we're gonna increase corporate taxes to pay for it. Well, you say you don't wanna increase corporate taxes. Well, you can't have it both ways. Which one is it? Do you wanna add it to the deficit or do you wanna increase corporate taxes? Make him answer the question. But no one challenges him publicly on that. Certainly Biden doesn't, he doesn't put any pressure on him. And if without sticks, he's gonna run roughshod over this thing. Are there still provisions in here that are a little bit helpful? Sure, there's like electric charging stations for electric cars. That's really good. No, and helping the energy infrastructure.
Like
no, hold on, and helping the energy infrastructure in this country and have a better energy grid, yes. But you can't hang your hat on the usual Obama 5% change. You just can't. And they're doing it now, they're getting steamrolled. And they need strong leadership desperately, and it doesn't look like they have it at this point.
Here's what I'm not interested in doing, okay? I'm not interested in joining the cheerleading that we're now seeing from Democrats like Speaker Nancy Pelosi, okay? Who's already doing her part in positive PR for a bill that is unrecognizable at this point. Remember the 12 months of paid family leave that was proposed by Biden originally? That got cut down to only 4 weeks, and now we're learning that 4 weeks, we don't want to make that permanent. We'll make it expire in 3 to 4 years. Think about that for a second, okay? They also, as I mentioned, are doing away with the major climate provisions that are necessary, not just for their political futures, who cares about that? For the future of humanity here on Earth, okay? They've taken that out because Manchin's got to profit from fossil fuels. He's got his personal investments in the fossil fuel industry. We can't mess with that. That's very, very important. Also, lots of scaled down versions of things that they were bragging about doing earlier, either completely cut out or scaled down, as I mentioned. Universal pre-K. That so far doesn't seem like it's gonna get cut, but understand why. That serves business interests. If business interests can avoid paying higher taxes while ensuring that public money goes into pre-K, that means that more mothers, more fathers are freed up to go to work. They can go back to the mines. That's why they haven't attacked that. But everything else that would actually materially improve Americans' lives, either on the chopping block completely gone, or it's been scaled back so much and means tested so much that it's unlikely to have a major impact on Americans' lives. And with that said, with all of those cuts, you have Nancy Pelosi speaking to Jake Tapper over the weekend to brag about how wonderful this bill is, even with everything stripped out of it. Watch.
We had the rescue package, $1.9 trillion. We have the infrastructure bill, over $1 trillion. That's around $3 trillion, and we'll have this at $2 trillion. Nobody has done anything that remarkable. So while it isn't everything that was put out originally, it takes us down a path where we can continue investments in these. Now, this piece, the care piece, I did the climate, health, the care piece is all three of them make it transformative for America's working families.
It is a big bill.
It's a very big bill.
It would accomplish a lot.
Even at half, it's a very big bill.
It's not transformative. It's not transformative. First of all, the rescue package, they're still bragging about passing coronavirus relief during a pandemic where people were forced to go home, where businesses were forced to shut down. Oh, wow, we sent everybody a few checks here and there that did not in any way recover the amount of money they would have been making if they were working. But hey, transformative, it was transformative. Please don't bring up the infrastructure deal, which is a corporate handout bill and nothing more than that. And then, you want to brag about this reconciliation bill. You've taken everything that matters out of it.
So that little clip was enormously telling. Number one, Nancy Pelosi's points that she made is indistinguishable from what Joe Manchin is saying publicly. She said, we already did this trillion and that trillion, and this is already a lot of money. That's exactly what Manchin says. And then Jake Tapper, if you noticed, then jumps in as the corporate media cheerleader that he is and goes, it's a big bill. It's already a big bill. I mean, you wouldn't want to do any of the things that are progressive in there. So what are we talking about? And by the way, when we say progressive, I don't want you to get the wrong idea because of corporate media. It's things that anywhere from 2/3 to 90% of the country agrees with. Yes, that's the percentage that agrees with progressives. You'll never see that. Okay. So what am I talking about? So first of all, on paid family leave, do you know how brutal we are as a country? Just real quick summary, these are the only other countries in the world that don't have paid family leave. Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Nauru, Palau, Papua New Guinea, Suriname, and the island nation of Tonga. And the United States of America. Every other nation on earth has paid family leave. To be fair, there was one other country out of the 185 that offers less than 4 weeks, and we're now at 4 weeks if those negotiations go through, and that's the law, and it's only for a part of the time. So we would be right around the same ballpark as Eswatini. That used to be Swaziland, it's now Eswatini. So congratulations to us. You know what the average is for the rest of the world? For when you have a kid, 29 weeks of leave. And we're now down to maybe 4 weeks.
But it has to expire, Jake.
And it has to expire.
It has to expire. Can't be permanent.
So now, what percentage of Americans want paid family leave? A gigantic percentage, over 70%. Okay. Now, how about negotiating drug prices? They're taking that out. It is indefensible to take that out. Indefensible. 90% of the country wants that provision in. Have you ever seen 90% on any issue? Oh, look, they say, oh, we're so divided, we're so divided. No, almost all the Republicans agree with Democrats, agree with AOC and the progressives that they want to negotiate drug prices. It's insane not to. We're the only country in the world. Even Eswatini doesn't do that. We're the only ones who say, oh, drug companies, you can charge us anything you want. That's insane. And yet, it's gonna be taken out. And by the way, why is it taken out? Because our country is under corporate rule. And corporations do not consent to paying 1 red cent more, and they will crush you and grind you down. By the way, right wing, if you're mad about that, you're right. You should be mad about that. And what do you think these corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans are agreeing to? They're agreeing to corporate rule. By the way, yes, we blame Biden and Manchin and Sinema and Democratic leadership, but remember, they couldn't do any of that without every single Republican politician in Congress saying, hell no, I would never give anything to the American people, never.
Right.
Corporations must have everything.
Well, look, Democrats are supposed to differentiate themselves from Republicans. They certainly do in the rhetoric they use in their campaigns. Actions speak louder than words. Actions would have me believe, at least, that corporate Democrats really on these big issues are no different than Republicans. Just keeping it real.
On economic issues, they're about to prove it. They could prove us wrong. They could pass something that's meaningful. But if they don't, then yes, the great majority of the Democratic Party on economic issues agrees with all of the Republicans that corporations should rule us all. We should pay for everything and they should pay for nothing.
All right, Wisconsin is loosening up child labor laws. Awesome. We've got that story and more for you when we come back.
All right, back on TYT. You guys have so many great questions. I want to get to them as quickly as I can. First of all, Andrew Sandy Bowles, thank you for joining. We appreciate it. Hit the join button below on YouTube. You obviously could do it through tyt.com/join as well. So Dirge writes in the member section, will the media call out Manchin for lying about the size of the bill? He said it was too much money when it was specific things he wanted out. Doubtful, no, 0% chance, move on. Vicky, totally agree, progressives vote no. They won't, by the way. John Bogino, how is this gutted building back better? There's nothing left. Yep. So honestly, I don't know what's left. They keep talking about ballpark of $1.5 to $2 trillion. Every provision we wanted is out. What's left? There's the charging stations.
No, the only provision that's left is pre-K. Assuming that doesn't get cut, you have to understand the reasoning for why it remains. It remains because that means that people will be freed up to go to work.
Yeah.
That's it, that's all it is. It serves corporate interests, that's all it is. We are run by corporations, not by politicians, period. That's what the reality is. As long as we have lawmakers personally and financially invested in individual stocks.
Yeah.
And while they take money from corporations in the form of legalized bribes, this is the outcome. This will always be the outcome. I'm partially angry at myself because for a moment, I forgot to have no faith in our lawmakers and our system, okay? For a moment. This is how the system's set up, everyone. This was predictable. Don't be naive, don't be like me.
Okay, guys, I've been saying this for over a decade. This is the result you'll get every time.
Every time.
Unless you take the money out. It's not theoretical, it's super practical and real. So you have only one choice left, wolf-pac.com. I'm not kidding. If you don't get an amendment that Wolfpack's going for, That you will see this movie 100 times in your life, and they'll pretend to do something big. In fact, that goes to Derek. Just like what Cori Bush said, when they passed this, they're going to say they, quote, did something for the next decade. 100%. I saw it happen with the Dodd-Frank bill. It was the weakest legislation I've ever seen in so-called reforming finance. And then finance went to running amok again. And then they said, no, it's okay, it's historic. Historic! If you ask anybody in corporate media now, they'll tell you it was the most historic thing that ever happened. And when we have the next crash, they'll say, oh, nobody could have seen it coming. Okay. Now, speaking of which, I am Sock wrote in. Why are progressives afraid of a failed vote? They'll get nothing either way. No, I honestly keep it real. They're afraid that the media is going to yell at them.
And the media will yell at them.
They will. That's 100% true.
They also need to understand that what corporate Democrats want is a win. They want something to point to as they run for re-election. Progressives shouldn't give them that, because corporate Democrats should suffer the consequences of their disgusting behavior. Progressives giving them a win is honestly a loser way of responding to all of this.
Yep, Mr. Pink wrote in on Super Chat, progressives held back the fight in Fight for 15 when they had leverage on a must-pass bill, now folding like a lawn chair on a climate and social net. Well, if that's what happens, which is very likely, we told them they wouldn't listen. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Look, I'm at the risk of derailing us. Anna was just asking during the break, what's the point of elections? Well, I said, social issues. But you know what? Have they really done anything on police reform? Nothing.
No, they totally
Voting
let
rights,
that
nothing.
Fall by the wayside.
What have they done on any social issues? Nothing. So
they love to campaign on it.
Yeah.
Democrats are the good guys. They're the ones who actually care about the disenfranchised until they're in power and have the ability to do something about it. In that case, all of a sudden, what can we do? Our hands are tied. It's just fodder for their political campaigns. It's disgusting. Anyway, moving on to other news. In response to labor shortages, Wisconsin State Senate has decided to approve a bill that would loosen up regulations pertaining to child labor. Get those kids back at work. Make them work long hours. That's what the solution is apparently to the labor shortage. Wisconsin currently sticks to federal child labor laws, which stipulate that people under the age of 16 can only work between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. from June 1st to Labor Day, and between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. for the rest of the year. But here's what the state Senate just did. Wisconsin Senate approved a bill on Wednesday that would allow 14 and 15-year-olds to work from 6 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. on days before a school day, and 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. when the next day isn't a school day. The bill, by the way, would keep in place federal rules limiting teens to 3 hours of work on a school night, 8 hours on non-school days, and 6 days of work per week. And by the way, if some of you guys are wondering, all right, well, what does this mean in regard to the amount that 14-year-olds would be paid, right? You would assume that they would get paid minimum wage. Well, minor workers are entitled to be paid the same minimum wage as other workers, but workers under 20 can be paid as little as $4.25 an hour for up to 90 days of training. If a state has a higher minimum wage, that would supersede the minor wage. But in Wisconsin, the minimum wage is tied to the federal minimum wage at just $7.25 an hour. In fact, Wisconsin's minimum wage tied to the federal minimum wage, a special minimum wage of just $5.90 per hour, $2.13 per hour for tipped employees, is applicable to opportunity employees under 20 years old who have worked for less than 90 days with their current employer. So it's very likely that some of these 14-year-olds who end up working late into the night will get paid just a measly $5.90 per hour. But I'm sure there will be all sorts of justifications for why that's okay. They're young, they deserve to be underpaid and exploited like that.
Okay, well, we've got a new champion in euphemisms. Child labor is now opportunity employees. Did you notice that? They just say it without like, oh yeah, of course. And torture is enhanced interrogation, and child labor is opportunity employees.
It's a great opportunity to be exploited.
We gave you an opportunity to get paid less and learn to like it, because that's what's gonna happen the rest of your life. Now let's talk about the reality of why they're doing this. Is it to give people more of an opportunity? Does anybody still believe that? Okay, so number one, this helps, they have a labor shortage. And why do they have a labor shortage? Because they're not paying enough. You know, labor shortages can be solved overnight by paying more. That's just simple economics. It's like literally what you learn in Econ 101. No, it's not at all complicated. Pay more, you won't have any labor shortage, right? But they don't want to pay more to adults. So they say, what if we paid less to kids and had them work till 11 o'clock at night, and that way we don't have to pay the adults? And the Republicans in Wisconsin go, yes, that's a great idea. Kids, back to the mines, okay? Now, one other aspect of this, when they talk about, oh, look, there's this mythology of it's these young kids who are, got a summer job, they're looking for extra allowance, and this lets them know how the real world works in a good way, and they work their way up, and it's so they build this mythology, and then of course the media trumpets that out as if that's what's actually happening. No, like, is it true that there's a small percentage of people who are already wealthy, but their kids, they want them to learn a lesson or two and they're working at the local pizzeria? Sure, but the overwhelming majority of the cases are Bobby's working at the pizzeria because mom and dad don't make enough and they don't have money to give him an allowance. So he has to work there. He has to work there oftentimes for himself, but oftentimes also to help the family. This is not like some rosy picture you see on TV where they're like, oh, Bobby's getting some experience, and oh, he had a good summer job, and sure, he worked a little longer because that taught him how to be a man and understand the value of hard work. No, Bobby's got to help mom and dad because they don't have enough money because they're not getting paid any wages. Now they say, well, Bobby, now when you go to work, you're gonna get paid less than mom, and that's gonna squeeze mom and dad out of the labor force, and that way corporations will make even more money. That's what this is about.
That is what this is about. And I think the point you made about wanting to essentially respond to the labor shortage with increasing the pool of potential workers with the lowest paid workers is the best point. That's what this is really about. It's a way to prevent what we're told time and time again is the best part about capitalism, right? That it's all about market forces. And in this case, you have workers who are standing up to terrible pay, terrible working conditions. And what do you think they do? They find loopholes, they find ways to get around it. Not by increasing pay or actually listening to the workers, but in this case, by increasing the pool of workers with individuals who would be paid far less, 14-year-olds. That's it, that's all this is.
And now let me go back to my, unfortunately, the thing that I harp on too much, but is relevant here. Oh my God, child labor is back. And there's several mainstream media articles I read on it, didn't even note it. They've painted it in a generally positive light.
Yep.
What the hell's positive about this? But they have no concept of how hard it is for actual Americans working out there at these starvation wages. And they don't, as reporters, they don't even bother pointing out, what are we doing here? This crushes the average worker, not just Bobby. And why is Bobby at 14 years old working at 11 o'clock for depressed wages? No, not one hint of criticism. And generally painted as, hey, look at this, Bobby's got an opportunity.
Yeah, and let me just make a prediction right here, right now. Remember, the 14-year-olds will get paid far less than the federal minimum wage, which is already pathetic, right? Federal minimum wage $7.25. In Wisconsin, they'll get paid a little more than $5 an hour, as long as it's 90 days or less. Any day above 90 days, they'd have to make the federal minimum wage. Don't be surprised if you see corporations succeed in lobbying lawmakers to repeal that federal rule regarding the 90 days for minors. Okay?
Of course.
I mean, we see, again, this country is run by corporations. We've seen how effective lobbying is. You don't think they're gonna lobby to repeal that law? They'll lobby to repeal that law and they'll succeed. And I guarantee you're gonna see a massive workforce of 14 and 15-year-olds working for less than minimum wage, less than the federal minimum wage.
So last thing on this is politics. So if Wisconsin has a Democratic governor, he should veto this. It should be easy, the easiest thing he's ever done. Will he? I have no idea. That's the sorry state of the Democratic Party. And the people who suggested this, so you're clear about it, are all the Republicans in Wisconsin. They think child labor is a great idea and lower wages is a great idea. It's literal. You can go ask them and they'll give you a whole bunch of excuses why you should make less money and their donors should make more off of your work. But there's no question, Republicans in Wisconsin say, bring the kids back to work and pay them less.
That does it for our first hour. It just flew by. But when we come back for hour two, we're gonna discuss some pretty shocking revelations regarding members of Congress and White House staffers coordinating with Capitol rioters to make the Capitol riot happen. We've got that story and more for you when we return.
Every day, the Young Turks delivers 2 hours of solid, fact-based, timely news and progressive commentary on all the day's most important stories. We keep our viewers informed while also providing perspective and insight on the news we cover, so you understand not only what's happening, but also what's happening behind the scenes, the stories behind the stories. Gee, I wonder why we didn't get $15 minimum wage. Because they're all raising money from the guys who don't want to increase the minimum wage.
And we play musical chairs and put these children in one awful detention facility to the next. That's what's happening at the border.
The things that got him banned, he's still spreading. So presumably, I think it's reasonable to say that if you allow him back on the website, he's going to do it again.
Any legal voter that we deem not willing to vote for my side shouldn't vote because it'll replace me that's supposed to vote for my side. That's not how voting works. That's not how democracy works.
And while many people following today's political news can get discouraged about the direction of the nation and the world, that's not us. At TYT, we're genuinely optimistic about the future, and with good reason. Today, wide majorities of Americans agree with our progressive stances on issues ranging from healthcare and education to climate, immigration, and wages. The rising generation of young people are also overwhelmingly progressive in their political beliefs and policy objectives, and they're increasingly flexing their muscle as voters and activists to demand change from our elected officials. The traditional mainstream media is mostly AWOL. They, along with the government and many other cherished institutions, have been captured by corporate interests. Audiences sense that they're not getting the whole story or even the truth from once trusted outlets, whether broadcasting cable TV news networks or national newspapers and magazines. The Republicans say we will serve our corporate masters at all costs, including killing democracy, yet here we are. Where else do you hear that? You hear that on NBC, on ABC, on CBS? You hear it nowhere.
They don't want to talk about money in politics because it's really hard to pass judgment when your media organization is funded by fossil fuel companies.
The antidote is the Young Turks. Unlike mainstream corporate outlets, we're not beholden to corporate advertisers, to defense contractors, to Wall Street, or to Big Pharma. And we don't carry water for the Republican or Democratic parties. So watch us Monday to Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and join the thousands of progressives around the globe who tune in every day for TYT's unmatched, award-winning content and see what it's like to experience a news organization that only answers to you.
I'll continue to sit. I'm going to continue to stand with the people that are being oppressed.
The president labeled him a son of a bitch.
I don't think it's good to be a distraction to your team.
To stand proudly for the national anthem.
You know, some of these people need to move to another country.
Well, you shouldn't be playing, you shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country.
The president is put in place to amplify the racists in this country.
Black men and boys are killed at an exponentially higher rate than white men and boys, as outlined by PBS. Black people are most likely to be killed by police, found mappingpoliceviolence.org. Personally, my biggest gripe is not saying how sports and politics have been attached at the hip. From the jockey syndrome, to the Negro Leagues, to Tommy Smith and John Carlos, Muhammad Ali, to modern day and everything in between. This is not an escape. It is a reflection of reality and a reflection of the times.
Everything that we've accomplished over the years is because of our members who've allowed us to remain independent of corporate interests and reach 20 million followers. Now is the time to bring as many people into the progressive movement as possible. We're inviting you to be the change and help bring a community-powered progressive change machine to life. Details are at tyt.com/change. If you're a member, thank you. We need you to remain so. If you're one of the thousands of viewers out there who's not a member yet, the time has come for you to join now. We need you more than ever. tyt.com/change. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Lots of really important news left. Let's do it.
The January 6th Capitol rioters are now telling investigators that they participated in dozens of planning meetings with members of Congress and also White House staff. Now there's, I think, a pretty jarring element of this story that involves Representative Paul Gosar, but here are some of the other details. Two sources claim they interacted with members of Trump's team, including former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, who they describe as having had an opportunity to prevent the violence. One rioter told Rolling Stone, quote, "I remember Marjorie Taylor Greene specifically. I remember talking to probably close to a dozen other members at one point or another, or their staffs." Along with Greene, the pair both say the members who participated in these conversations or had top staffers join in included Representative Paul Gosar, Representative Lauren Boebert, Mo Brooks, Madison Cawthorn, Andy Biggs, and Representative Louis Gohmert of Texas. In fact, one of the organizers said this: "We would talk to Boebert's team, Cawthorn's team, Gosar's team, like back to back to back to back." And according to these sources, multiple people associated with the March for Trump and Stop the Steal events that took place during this period communicated with members of Congress throughout the process. So as this was all taking place, apparently they were in communication with members of Congress. At least that's what they claim based on their interview with Rolling Stone. Now let's get to Paul Gosar, because this is the most damning revelation from this Rolling Stone piece. One of them tells the reporters that our impression was that it was a done deal, that he'd spoken to the president about it in the Oval in a meeting about pardons, and that our names came up. They were working on submitting the paperwork and getting members of the House Freedom Caucus to sign on as a show of support. Now that was one of the organizers claiming that Representative Paul Gosar promised that there would be blanket pardons for those who took part in the events of that day. The organizer claims the pair received several assurances about the blanket pardon from Gosar. In fact, one of them said, "I was just going over the list of pardons and we just wanted to tell you guys how much we appreciate all the hard work you've been doing," Gosar said, according to the organizer. Cenk.
So, look, I don't know that we have the same opinion as all other progressives, people on the left or Democrats about January 6th. So I think people going to their lips to hear Trump's speech is normal. Do I like it? No. Do I think it was maniacal in claiming that they won the election when they didn't? Yeah, of course I think it's maniacal. It's not backed up by any evidence. Trump didn't have any evidence in that speech. We can go on and on about that. And them trying to undermine democracy is also terrible, but still no laws are broken. Okay, but when you go to the Capitol and you break in, that's different. Not only are you breaking laws about trespassing and all the cops who were assaulted, the people who died, etc., but then you're actually taking a physical step towards saying, I don't care who won. I don't care about the process. I don't care about democracy. I'm just gonna do this with physical force. I'm gonna go there, and remember the whole point of January 6th is that was the day that they were certifying the election. And the point of the violence is to say, do not certify the Democratic election. We're gonna seize power through force instead. And so if Marjorie Taylor Greene or anyone else had a conversation about, hey, why don't you come to the Lips and watch our insane speech that Donald Trump's gonna give about how we won in fantasy land, I don't really care. I don't think that's a criminal offense. I don't think it's something that anybody should be worried about. If you went to the speech and you didn't go to the Capitol, that's normal. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? Now, but Gosar saying that and his office, if it's true, saying that the president will give you pardons means they knew that something criminal was going to happen. Otherwise, why are you talking about pardons? Who says, hey, let's go grab lunch at a restaurant over there, and don't worry, I'll give you a pardon? Why? What are we gonna do at the restaurant? Are we gonna rob it? What do I need a pardon for? And so, if that's proven correct, Gosar's office clearly wanted to encourage them to break the law and break our democracy by doing a literal violent seizure of the government.
Now, the two people who spoke to Rolling Stone about all of this, including the statements regarding Gosar, were furious at the fact that they were abandoned by Donald Trump. In fact, they said as much during the interview. Let's go to graphics 11 and 12 here. One of the Capitol Riot planners said this: I do feel abandoned by Trump. I'm actually pretty pissed about it, and I'm pissed at him. And by the way, both of them describe Katrina Pearson, who worked for Trump's campaign in 2016 and 2020, as a key liaison between the organizers of protests against the election and the White House. Katrina was like our go-to girl, the organizer said. She was our primary advocate. So as this special panel investigating what happened that day continues its investigation, there are other people that I think are worth subpoenaing and having a conversation with, Katrina Pearson being one of them, considering this is what we're now hearing from two of the individuals involved in organizing what happened that day. With that said, though, going back to Marjorie Taylor Greene, you're right, Cenk, in that we don't have enough details about the specifics regarding these conversations with Marjorie Taylor Greene and other lawmakers that were referenced earlier. I do want to go to this video of Marjorie Taylor Greene, though. This is from December 21st of 2020. There was a lot of messaging regarding, stopping the steal and how the election was allegedly stolen from Donald Trump. This is just one example of the type of rhetoric that you can hear from Marjorie Taylor Greene in the aftermath of the election. And just understand that this is her walking out of a January 6th planning meeting. Let's watch.
Just finished with our meetings here at the White House this afternoon. We had a great planning session for our January 6th objection. We aren't going to let this election be stolen by Joe Biden and the Democrats. President Trump won by a landslide.
Okay, great. So we need to know the specifics of what was actually planned in that meeting. So if United States representatives were coordinating with the rioters to do a riot, then there should be consequences for that. And look, the thing is, these are the details as we know them right now. Here's my prediction, though, that these lawmakers will not really be investigated. And if they are investigated and there is wrongdoing discovered through that process, what are Democrats gonna do? Like, I've lost so much faith in the Democratic Party that I genuinely don't believe, I would not bet money that they would find a way to hold these Republican lawmakers accountable if there was actual evidence indicating that they coordinated with the rioters to carry out the riots.
Inconceivable, and I'll tell you why, by the way, just real quick. Because if Gosar broke the law and encouraged criminal activity, and they used the law against him as they would any human being, well, that's gonna set a precedent. So if the Republicans get in charge, they'll want to arrest Democrats. Will Republicans care about the law? No, they'll just make things up. They don't care at all, right? And Democrats are scared to death of that. And that's why they think you leave the elites alone. You bash regular people who listen to them, and you put them in jail for a long time. But the elites, no, that could affect us. So that's why the Democrats, at the end of the day, this is about politics, will actually not enforce the law. I find that inconceivable. So now let me give you more details that are important. First, just a quick aside here that's fun. The guy who's the head of Cowboys for Trump has just come out today also against Trump saying, what happened, man? I thought we were gonna arrest Hillary Clinton. We chanted lock her up 1,000 times. And he spent 4 years, he never arrested Hillary Clinton. Now we're arrested, and I thought we were gonna get pardons, and none of us got pardons.
Oh, did Trump lie to you?
Exactly.
Did Trump lie to you, cowboy for Trump?
And by the way, Trump is just like the Democrats. He's among the elites. You think he cares about you? He told you to go walk to the Capitol, and he said he was gonna come with you. Did he? No. Did he pardon you? No. Did Gosar pardon you or help get Trump to pardon you? No. None of them did anything. They played you for fools if you were in that riot on January 6th. Now, there's another really important part of this, because they said these two organizers said to both the reporters and to Congress, hey, listen, the Capitol was never in play in the original plans. We were just supposed to, remember the Capitol's a mile and a half away from where Trump gave the speech. They said we were supposed to go give the speech and we were supposed to put like political pressure on senators to flip their vote and not certify the election. We needed at least one senator, et cetera, right? You keep it political like that, and you put political pressure on, again, I don't agree 1%, but there's nothing wrong with it. That's normal democracy, okay? Relatively normal because you're trying to undo democracy, but you haven't done anything criminal, okay? But it turns out people started diverging, and they point to Ali Alexander and how he organized what was called, quote, the wild protest. Now, wait a minute, why do you need a wild protest? And the other organizers are telling Alexander, don't do the wild protest. No, you're gonna get us in trouble. They then go and tell Mark Meadows, the chief of staff for President Trump, they say this guy's going rogue and he's planning to do things that are gonna get everybody in trouble. And Meadows knows and doesn't do anything about it.
In fact, Ali Alexander bragged about this in a now deleted live stream, and I want to read you what he said during the live stream. He said, I was the person who came up with the January 6th idea with Congressman Gosar, Congressman Mo Brooks, and Congressman Andy Biggs. We four schemed up on putting maximum pressure on Congress while they were voting so that who we couldn't lobby, we could change the hearts and minds of Republicans who were in that body hearing our loud roar from outside.
Nothing wrong with pressuring politicians. You're supposed to do that in democracy. You want to hear them, have them hear you roar from outside in protest? Nothing wrong with that, right? That's why we don't want fences going up in the Capitol. When you break down the doors and you had a plan to do a wild protest and you were planning pardons afterwards, well, that means you were planning to break the law, and there's something deeply wrong with that. And so it's one thing to lobby politicians, it's another thing to assault them. And remember, as they were going in, they were chanting, hang Mike Pence, because Mike Pence is technically the guy who certified the election. So when they broke in, their intent was not to lobby Mike Pence, but to murder Mike Pence. That's a giant distinction. And by the way, as you make that distinction, the criminals should be held to account, but people who are doing a normal protest should not be held to account for the crimes of the people who actually were criminals.
Totally agree on that.
Because if you do that, then you're gonna say, okay, no more protesting of anyone who's an elite. No, protest away, but you break the law, then that's a completely different issue. And that's why you need this investigation. I don't know that it'll do any good at all because of what we said earlier. The Democrats are likely to just use it for politics and not actually take any action to protect the rule of law. But we need to know who knew they were gonna break the law, when did they know it, how much did they help them? Here, one last quote. One of the organizers said Meadows was 100% made aware of what was going on in terms of Ali Alexander going to the Capitol, bringing people there to do a quote unquote wild protest. And apparently Meadows sanctioned it, but we don't know that. Bring him in, ask him the question, and if he sanctioned violence, he should go to jail, and so should Paul Gosar, but not if they didn't.
All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, Texas's Stand Your Ground law strikes again with an innocent, unarmed person getting shot and killed in his own vehicle. We have that detail and more details on that story and more when we come back.
usual programming notes for you guys at this time of the day. First of all, some of you watch the multicast of the Damage Report on this channel, on the Young Turks channel. But starting on Monday, November 1st, it's going to be exclusively on youtube.com/The Damage Report. youtube.com/The Damage Report. Please check that out at 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Watch it live. So many fun things happen during our live shows that never make it into the clips. So please check that out when you get a chance. Okay, and for our members, tomorrow we're doing Ask Me Anything. So go to the community tab if you're a member on YouTube and submit a question for me and Anna. That's tomorrow right after the show. Tonight, Old School's on at 10 o'clock Eastern, and it is Old School. Me, Ben, and Mark Thompson. You guys will love it. And then we do still have the Pocky Chip Challenge as a possibility. If we get to 6,200 subscribers, a lot of our hosts do it at 7,000 subscribers. I'll do it on Twitch, but we are running short on time, and I have been warned against it. But we proceed afoot nonetheless. In fact, Big T, the pyro guy on Super Chat, wrote in. So a buddy of mine did the one chip challenge over the weekend. I got one word: oof. Okay, Edwin's trying to convince me not to do it. No, I'm gonna do it. Look, guys, I don't know if we're gonna make it though. We always say I don't know if we're gonna make it, and then we make it, but we might not in this case. So we'll see how it goes. But if we do, it's gonna be an interesting Halloween. So will be 2 Fridays from now. Richard Rowe for Congress writes in on Super Chat. What the hell's still in the bill? So we discussed that earlier. The answer is not much. Sage and Candle writes in. Illinois switched Medicaid providers last month. This week, I got a bill for back premiums of $3,400. Unreal. Our healthcare system is insane. We didn't get to it, but there's a story in the rundown today. I think it was over 80% of Americans say we need to fundamentally change our healthcare system. That is much larger than other countries, because other countries don't send you random bills for $3,400 you couldn't possibly afford. And we've got literally millions of those type of stories, and thank you for writing in about that.
Yeah, let me give you that stat. 85% of surveyed American adults said they wanted an overhaul of the country's political systems, while 66% said they wanted major changes to the US economy. Just over 3/4 of respondents said there need to be major reform to the country's healthcare systems.
Yes.
So, but it doesn't, you guys, it doesn't matter. You have no power. This country is ruled by corporations.
And the media will tell you there's nothing wrong at all. They don't know. They can't for the life of them figure out why you guys are upset.
Greatest country in the world.
Yeah. So Tandra Blankson wrote in on Super Chat. Super Chat for Anna. I'm sickened by this. I work 2 full-time jobs, one to pay the bills and one to pay for college for my 2 kids. I almost cried about the free community college being taken out.
Yep. I feel you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your drug prices are going to be monstrous. Every part of it is horrific. Progressives got to get a spine. That's the reality. Back on TYT Cenk and Anna with you guys. I can't help but read this one more Super Chat from R. Stone. He wrote in, so the only bill that directly supports your voter base, you managed to cut out young people, the elderly, and Mother Earth. What are you gonna run on in 2020? Toll roads? Great job, Democratic leadership. That's where we are.
They deserve what's coming in 2022.
But we don't. We don't. Then we'll have Republican rule, and that's corporate rule plus fascism. Yay.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, well, a Texas man is facing a first-degree murder charge after he shot and killed an unarmed individual who was parked in a vehicle right next to his truck in his driveway. Now, the case could challenge the state's so-called stand your ground law because, of course, the perpetrator here is using self-defense as the excuse for firing his weapon and killing someone. But I want to give you the details and you can judge for yourself. So this is a story about 65-year-old Terry Dwayne Turner, who says he woke up in the middle of the night to use the restroom and he found this unknown vehicle parked inside his driveway right next to his truck. He said that the headlights were turned off and here's what happened. Turner said he returned to his bedroom to get his handgun because this is America and that's the first thing you'd want to do, right? And ran outside to find the headlights of the vehicle turned on, according to the affidavit. Turner told police that the car rapidly backed out of his driveway. He chased after it and struck the front driver's side door window twice with his handgun and fired the gun, striking the driver, the affidavit said. So here's Terry Turner for you. He did carry out this shooting in early October 11th to be specific, and he just recently was charged with first-degree murder weeks after the shooting took place. The victim was identified as Adil Dahugi. He's a 31-year-old and here's a photo of him just so you see what he looks like. Young guy who was apparently visiting San Antonio with his girlfriend. His girlfriend believes that he was lost and was looking up directions on his phone when the shooting happened. Now, Turner told the 911 operator, and this is an incredibly important part of the story, after the shooting that I just killed a guy, adding that the victim here started racing away and I ran after him. He pointed a gun at me and I shot. Now, of course, investigators didn't find a gun in his possession, according to the affidavit. So although the incident happened on October 11th, Turner was just turned himself in last Friday. So weeks after the shooting took place, but the police department is saying that they handled everything right. This is the Caldwell County Sheriff's Office. They say that detectives have worked tirelessly on this case since the incident occurred on October 11th. Detectives have conducted multiple interviews and executed multiple search warrants in the course of this investigation.
So, unfortunately, this is a thing that we told you about, that the people who have these guns, not all of them, of course, but unfortunately, a gigantic percentage of them can't wait to shoot. They're not using it for self-defense. They can't wait to shoot the gun. So now, just think about it from your perspective. I'll tell you my perspective and then you think about what you would do, right? So if you saw a guy that you thought might be dangerous in your driveway, some of you might go to get your gun, okay? I wouldn't, I would think I'd call the police, right? What am I gonna go confront him? That puts me in more danger, not less danger, right? Okay, but let's say that you don't agree with me and you went and got your gun and you were careful and you came out and you wanted to just threaten him so he'd run away. Well, this guy was running away, even if you thought he was dangerous. Now, as it turns out, of course, he wasn't at all dangerous. Perfectly normal guy, college graduate, got into San Antonio, stops by 35 miles south of Austin to probably get directions like anybody would. He's just in front of somebody's house. How many times have you stopped in front of people's house? All right, I'll get back to that in a second. So, but let's say you thought, oh my God, he looks vaguely dark, whatever. Put that aside. And you think he's dangerous. He's driving away. Well, mission accomplished, right? He didn't rob you, he didn't put you in danger, he didn't put your family in danger. You did a great job by having him drive away. Why are you firing at him? You thought he pointed a gun. How sure do you have to be before you murder someone? I would want to be super sure.
Well, for some people, you don't have to be super sure, apparently.
No, but that's the thing. He's dying to shoot the gun and kill someone, right? So he didn't need to be sure at all. Would you? How sure would you want to be? I don't know. Maybe you agree with him. You think, I don't care. I don't care if he has a gun or he doesn't have a gun. He obviously didn't see a gun because the gun didn't exist. But if you saw a gun and he's already driving away, give him every benefit of the doubt. He's already driving away. Why would you then shoot at him, which would cause him to shoot back at you and put your life in danger? I thought the gun was to protect you. Well, in that case, it would endanger you more because you'd start a gunfight when the guy's trying to leave. No, he wanted to shoot him. He was dying to use that gun. He's not alone. There are, I don't know if it's hundreds of thousands or millions of right-wing maniacs in this country who cannot wait to shoot their gun.
They're looking around every corner. Is that a gun? Is that a gun? Is that a black guy? Is that a brown guy? What is going on? Is there somebody near my driveway? I'll kill him, right? If you don't now, comes the most important part. If they don't put this guy away, the precedent they're setting in Texas is, if you park on the street or near someone's house in any way, shape, or form, they have a right to murder you.
I mean, that precedent's already set. That it's already set. Because look, self-defense means someone poses an imminent threat to you, and so you have no choice but to fire your weapon or use some sort of physical force to defend yourself, to defend your life. But as we learned through what happened to Trayvon Martin in Florida, remember, George Zimmerman followed Trayvon Martin, even though the dispatcher that he was in communication with told him, do not follow him. If you genuinely think he's a threat to you, do not follow him. He continued following him anyway, right? To the point where an altercation occurred, okay? And through that physical altercation, Zimmerman fired his gun and killed a teenager. That's what happened. And guess what? He was let off. Florida, another stand your ground state. Texas, a stand your ground state. And the data's already in. I mean, the data regarding how stand your ground is implemented and how it's led to more innocent unarmed people getting killed, those stats are in. I'll give you some of them, some of the more recent stats. In 2020, the Rand Corporation released a research review of the impact of various gun-related state policies and found that strong evidence linked stand your ground laws with an increase in firearm homicide rates. None of the research found that stand your ground laws prevent violent crime. So let's get to some specifics here. Instead, these laws are associated with an increase in homicide rates, translating to more than 150 additional gun deaths each month in the United States overall.
Each month?
Each month, okay? A recent study published in the Journal of the American College of Surgeons, excuse me, comparing the 5 years before states began enacting these laws, 2000 to 2004, to the 13-year period following their enactment, 2005 to 2017, found justifiable firearm homicide rates increased by 55% in states that enacted stand your ground, while these rates increased by 20% in states that did not have such laws.
So look, the data is in and it's overwhelming. But I know giant, not all, but a huge percentage of the right wing don't care about your stinking data and your stats and your facts. I want to shoot the gun. I don't care about your stupid facts, okay? And then I don't want to be held responsible if I kill someone. So fair warning, including to myself, to everybody. And if you don't live in America, even more so to you, because you're probably unfamiliar with how things work. Be really careful about going to a red state. There's some chance they could just murder you and get away with it. That's insane, and I feel terrible saying it, but it actually is a fact in America. And so if they let this guy off, I mean, if you go to Texas, you're playing with your life. You walk by anyone's home, you drive by anybody's home, and they would have a right to just shoot you on the spot and kill you dead, and get away with it. So that's, but we'll see. We'll see. He's arrested. We'll see. We'll see how the court goes.
Right. He posted bond and was released less than 2 hours after he turned himself in.
Okay, great. By the way, can I say, look, I hate going to people's houses, and I would never go anywhere near this house, and I wouldn't tell you not to. But this is a situation where we should know his address because he's out in the open. And not to go to his house, but to avoid his house, to avoid his whole neighborhood, because there's a murderer who's out on what, bail?
Bond, yeah.
On bond, who thinks he has a right to kill you if you're anywhere near his house, including on public land.
And let me just be clear that there is disparity regarding how often that defense works in courts, right?
Yes,
there's a disparity regarding the race of the individual who opened fire and uses stand your ground as a defense. So we don't know how this case is gonna play out. I wanna be clear about that. But in previous shows where we've covered this particular topic, we've shown you the statistics indicating that there is a disparity. So if the person opening fire is a minority, black, brown, doesn't matter, they're far less likely to use that defense in court and actually have it work.
Yeah, I mean, there was a story of a black woman we covered. Her husband's also black. He comes in, he's threatening her. She then grabs a gun and fires it into the sky to warn him off, like, hey, don't come, because there was physical altercations before. I mean, it's a perfect stand your ground case, because he might have grabbed the gun. She did not shoot at him.
Right.
I mean, and they're like, they put her away. She's black, put her away, right? Ahmaud Arbery. Now, the flip side of that, look, this is a dangerous country, man. If you're a minority, it is super dangerous in this country. He's jogging in the neighborhood. Guys go and chase him down in a pickup truck and they shoot him dead. He's in the middle of the day, a jogger, right? And you know that until there was enormous public pressure, the local authorities didn't even arrest those guys. They're like, oh, you saw a black guy jogging in the neighborhood and you murdered him, of course, free to go. Only after enormous public pressure, like way later, did they finally like, oh, begrudgingly, now we gotta arrest white guys shooting random black guys in the neighborhood. Okay, I guess so. So that's the state of this country, and it's a scary, scary place.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about Facebook because that is an ongoing topic of discussion, especially now that we have some testimony from a Facebook whistleblower. So, a trove of Facebook documents has been released detailing how the social media site has exposed vulnerable communities around the world to a cocktail of dangerous content, divisive content. Now, these internal documents, dubbed the Facebook Papers, were published widely by a consortium of news outlets who obtained the redacted materials made available by a company whistleblower. Her name is Frances Haugen. Now, let me give you some of these revelations, and then we'll go to some of the testimony from the whistleblower herself. So, according to the Washington Post, the company exhaustively studies potential policy changes for their effects on user engagement and other factors key to corporate profits. Amid this push for user attention, Facebook abandoned or delayed initiatives to reduce misinformation and radicalization. In fact, one 2019 report tracking a dummy account set up to represent a conservative mother in North Carolina found that Facebook's recommendation algorithms led her to QAnon, an extremist ideology that the FBI has deemed a domestic terrorism threat, in just 5 days. Still, Facebook allowed QAnon to operate on its site largely unchecked for another 13 months. Now, before we go to more details about these documents and what they say, I do want to go to the first video featuring Frances Haugen because she is not only the Facebook whistleblower, she's given us a lot of insight, honestly reinforcing what many already believed, but also giving us some new information. And she talks here specifically about how the algorithm favors bad actors who post the divisive content. Let's watch.
I am not aware of any research that demonstrates a political bias on Facebook. I am familiar with lots of research that says the way engagement-based ranking was designed, so Facebook calls it meaningful social interactions, though meaningful could have been hate speech or bullying up until November 2020, and it would still be considered meaningful. So let's call it social interaction ranking. I've seen lots of research that says that kind of ranking, engagement-based ranking, prioritizes polarizing, extreme, divisive content. It doesn't matter if you're on the left or on the right. It pushes you to the extremes, and it fans hate, right? Anger and hate is the easiest way to grow on Facebook. There's something called virality hacking, where you figure out all the tricks on how to optimize Facebook. And good actors, good publishers are already publishing all the content they can do. But bad actors have an incentive to play the algorithm, and they figure out all the ways to optimize Facebook. And so the current system is biased towards bad actors and biased towards people who push people to the extremes.
So before we go on, I just want to note one thing, right? The whole business model for Facebook and many other social media platforms is to increase engagement, meaning the more time you spend on the platform, the better. Now, people like to think of advertising as the main revenue source for Facebook, but the fact of the matter is they make a ton of money by collecting user data and selling it to third parties. That's a huge part of their profit motive and their profit model. And remember, this is a publicly traded company, which means they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. What they're trying to do is maximize profits for their shareholders. That is priority number one. So when you see the media and the way that they cover this story, I'm not saying reject the narrative or the questions about whether Mark Zuckerberg is a good guy or a bad guy. I think that that's a secondary question, because the primary thing that people should be focusing on is how this system, not just with Facebook, the system overall incentivizes exactly what Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook is doing right now. Again, fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders. That's number one. Everything else is secondary. They don't have a fiduciary, they don't have a responsibility to us as Americans or citizens of the world, right? They don't. The number one priority, again, is to the shareholders. That's why this is happening. It's not about individuals, it's about the system.
So the clip you saw, Frances Haugen, I agree and disagree. So, and this is important, and I've got facts to back it up. So the agreement part is the part that Anna's talking about. They want to drive up engagement because that drives up profits. So they're not doing it for no reason. That's the main reason why they're doing it. So what part do I disagree with? Well, she said it's not a right wing or a left wing thing. That's just not true. It's empirically not remotely true. And when you say dangerous things like that, what it's gonna do is have them go, oh, let's ban people saying racist things and criminal things and false things, but let's also ban people saying true things, non-criminal things, and fighting against racism. By the way, that has happened in the past. Any discussion of race, you're racist, you're against racism, it doesn't matter, we're banning you all. That's a coward's way out, okay? And very likely what they'll wind up doing. So so now, is she wrong about that? Yeah, I have quotes from Wall Street Journal here. They have documents that they looked at from Facebook. Here's one quote from Wall Street Journal. The documents viewed by the Journal, which don't capture all of the employee messaging, said, quote, didn't mention equivalent debates over left-wing publications. So they had debates about, wait a minute, right-wing publications, they're saying all these hateful things, it's driving false things, and it's driving things. Did they have debates about left-wing publications and making exemptions for them to violate their rules? Never once. If a left-wing publication violates any rule, gone, okay? Right-wing publications like Breitbart violating rule after rule after rule. In fact, here's another quote from the Wall Street Journal. They also allege Facebook gave special treatment to Breitbart and other conservative publishers, helping them skirt penalties for circulating misinformation or hate speech.
Why?
But show me if it's both, okay? Show me where the left wing is promoting hate speech or misinformation. By the way, if they are, I think they should face the same consequences as any right-wing publication would. And I'll add another, by the way, I don't want the right wing being published for their opinions. So if you're bringing up, hey, I don't like what they're saying about Black Lives Matter, okay. But they got a right to say that. They have a right to cover the stories in any way that they view to be fine, unless they're violating your rules and they say black people are this, and you have a policy saying, well, you can't do that based on race. It depends on what your policies are, but you must enforce your policies fairly, not fairly as in, I don't know, I just took a bunch of right wingers and a bunch of left wingers and I banned them all because I didn't want to bother dealing with political ramifications. No, what did people actually do? So which then say, well, were they really scared of right wingers? More quotes. Here's from an actual researcher. When they were discussing internally at Facebook, hey, should we punish the right wing for clearly, obviously violating our laws? Quote, at best, it would be a very difficult policy discussion, okay? Here's another quote from an employee in an internal communication at the time. Quote, we're scared of political backlash if we enforce our policies without exemptions. So they're having conversations about how they're scared of the right wing. The right wing is intimidating them, and it's totally working. You see it in the internal communications. The last couple here. The staffer wrote about Breitbart, we make special exceptions to our written policies for them. We even explicitly endorse them by including them as trusted partners in our core products. And in case all of that wasn't clear enough, this is from Yahoo News. The whistleblower alleged that when questioned about a policy exempting publishers, including Breitbart News, from its standard rules, Facebook's vice president of global public policy, Joel Kaplan, said, quote, do you want to start a fight with Steve Bannon?
It's amazing.
So
it's pathetic.
The right wing bullied them and intimidated them, and by the way, also created profits for them through hatred and purposely violating the rules. And Facebook thought, profits plus disagreeing with a right winger is going to get me in a lot of trouble, political trouble in this country. So I don't want any piece of it. The right wing is now exempt from our rules.
Because
that's unbelievable. And if anyone in the left wing did it, they would be crushed to oblivion. So that's the reality of what's happening in social media.
But what's the main difference between the right wing and the left wing in the country? It's not just about the power behind the publication doing the publishing. It's about the funders funding the publication. And there are a lot of powerful people behind right wing content creators.
Yeah, and look, we're also beating around the bush. It looks by all indications on economic issues that Mark Zuckerberg is very much right wing.
It's a publicly traded corporation, of course. This is the way it works, guys. Doesn't matter if he's a good guy or a bad guy. That again, it is secondary. It's about incentives and disincentives. The incentives lead him to do what he's doing right now. That's it.
Zuckerberg on several occasions had dinner with Ben Shapiro, asking him, what shall we do? How many did he have with progressive leaders? 0. Nobody has to take progressive leaders into account. By the way, I'll say one last thing. Republicans use their politicians to put undue pressure on outlets like this, and it totally works. Democrats do no such thing. And even progressive leaders, they leave progressive media to fend for itself. And we have no allies, we have no political pressure, we have nothing. The right wing knows how to play this game, and progressives are so obsessed with themselves, they never actually band together to help one another. And it creates an uneven playing field where these guys run rampant and we can't do a damn thing.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, someone running for Senate in Ohio does not believe in the US Constitution or the separation of church and state. Also, Donald Trump is whining about Fox News again. We've got those stories and more. Don't miss them.
All right, let's go to Super Chat first. Hall Pass says, sorry, but like I said a couple of weeks ago, they would strip it down to nothing or kill it altogether. These are Republicans and progressive Democrats. No such thing as corporate Democrats. It's a Republican in Dem clothing. So that's referring, of course, to the reconciliation bill and how corporate Democrats are basically just Republicans. British 32 says, hi, Cenk and Anna, great interview with Anita Hill. By the way, if you were to ask Pelosi to name the main parts of the bill, she could she even describe them or just mumble random talking points to sound smart? I think we all know the answer to that question. Lars Nielsen says, if the progressive don't vote no on this bill, I'm never going to call your country USA anymore. Instead, I'm naming it USC, United States of Corporations. Well, I got news for you. That's largely what it is now. Okay. And corporate rule is almost complete. Bernie and the Just Democrats are the only ones opposing it, and well, we're about to find out how good they are at opposing it, and I'm really worried. Jason Ray says the Democrats in Wisconsin should counter the Republicans' child labor law with a bill to lower voting age to 14 in Wisconsin. It's such a great idea. I love how smart our audience is. The chance of Democrats doing anything in Wisconsin, let alone that, is near nil. If I'm in charge of Wisconsin and the Republicans want to pass a child labor law, I destroy them over it. I destroy them. Will the Democrats do that? Probably nothing. They're probably scared of them. And I'm saying, oh yeah, you want to have, well, if you think that a 14-year-old's responsible enough to work at McDonald's until 11 p.m., they're certainly responsible enough to vote. They'd be like, and Democrats would never do it. All right, Nonlinear Dragon says, shows how much we're still in this for the long haul. I'll be with TYT to the end. I've got your back and you've got mine. Well, that's exactly right. We do have your back and we're not gonna let up, okay? We're gonna keep on going and we're gonna keep telling the truth. And yes, the state of the Democratic Party is greatly dispiriting. You know, on almost every issue, they're not gonna do a goddamn thing. How pathetic a brand is that? Democrats, we swear we'll do nothing. And by the way, Biden literally said it during the campaign. He promised donors nothing will fundamentally change. And corporate media all rallied around him. Yes, nothing's gonna change. And when we criticize that, they're like, how dare you? How dare you? Okay, Gina J, the introvert, cheered 300 bits on Twitch. Frank Morning Tree cheered 100 and so did Squirrely Coney. These are all funny, thank you guys. Willowmaker Dragon said 11 months, can't stop, won't stop, trying to get all my friends and family onto TYT, here. Ching 3871 said 1 year, thank you and keep up the great work. And Athena 61 said, Bezos Bucks, love TYT and TDR, keep up the good work, you all make news bearable. All right, back on TYT, Dylan Pickles wrote on Twitch, I've been a member since 2015, came to Twitch to resub to not only give prime time money, but contribute to the 7,000 sub goal, hashtag eat the chip, Cenk. If you guys have Amazon Prime, you can actually give us Jeff Bezos' money for free. So go to tyt.com/prime and you can do it in about 30 seconds. Thank you, Casper.
Ohio Senate candidate Josh Mandel doesn't believe in the United States Constitution. At least he made that clear during a recent GOP Senate debate where he talked about the separation of church and state. Let's watch.
I think the worst thing happening to kids today is that the secular left, the fake news media, the uniparty in Washington, they're trying to take God out of all aspects of society. And they're trying to water down on the Judeo-Christian bedrock of America. And my personal feeling is we shouldn't be watering down, we should be doubling down. We should be instilling faith in the classroom, in the workplace, and everywhere in society. The secular left, the ACLU, the Southern Poverty Law Center, a lot of these Soros-funded organizations, they advance the argument that the separation of church and state exists, and for that reason, you can't teach kids about religion. My personal feeling is there's no such thing as separation of church and state.
Well, conservative once said that the facts don't care about your feelings. And if you look at literally the First Amendment of our Constitution, it states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So while he's talking about implementing lessons about God in public education and everywhere that you possibly can in public life, which God are we deciding on here? Because the government, meaning these public institutions, are not supposed to endorse one particular religion. So is he advocating for Allah? Is he advocating for a Christian God? Like, the Constitution bars this. It's not about your feelings. That's what this country is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about religious liberty, not specifically for Christianity, but for all religions. So the government endorsing one particular religion is literally unconstitutional. Like, what is happening right now?
Yeah, well, the right wing has decided we don't like this country. We don't like the Constitution. So look, guys, just the Josh Mandels of the world, you're going halfway towards something that is at least clear, right? So Mandel there is saying we should establish a religion. He does not believe that there should be any separation of church and state. There's a word for that. It's theocracy. So for example, Saudi Arabia has a theocracy.
Iran has a theocracy.
Iran does, the Vatican does. So there's different theocracies and they're of slightly different shades, but generally that's the idea where the state is combined with the church and there is no separation between church and state. By the way, you know who also had that? The Ottoman Empire did. They had the Islamic Caliphate and they combined the church and the state, in their case, the mosque and the state. And I was led to believe by the right wing that was monstrous and horrible and despicable when Saudi Arabia does it, etc. right? But here they're saying, no, we should do it. But then you have to add the next part, which is, I don't agree with the US Constitution. Because Anna read it for you, there's no lack of clarity at all. It says you shall not establish a state. You shall not establish a religion, right? Yep. And then the next part of it is equally obvious. Again, the point that Anna made. If you say no, the Constitution is wrong. I hate the US Constitution. I want a theocracy instead. Well, then you've got to tell us which religion and which sect of that religion should rule us all. So now, funny enough, Josh Mandel, he keeps talking about Judeo-Christian heritage. Later, he's going to admit to being a bigot. We'll show you that clip. He doesn't use the words theocracy, doesn't use the words bigot, but he says exactly what those things are. Right. So, but he's Jewish, so should Judaism rule us all? Okay, let's say that that's not the case when we have a majority Christian country, so let's go with Christianity. Well then, Josh Mandel, what if the sect is Pentecostal and they think you're full of crap being Jewish, and they don't, the leaders, because you're not gonna have a vote among the Pentecostals, the leaders are gonna decide. That's always what happens in a theocracy. Right. Mohammed bin Salman decides, not some sort of democratic election of Muslims in Saudi Arabia. So what if the Pentecostal leader decided, it's not a Judeo-Christian heritage, it's just a Christian heritage? What happens then? And by the way, why would the Episcopalians agree to that or the Lutherans? But Josh, just give us a little bit more clarity. I get that you hate the Constitution, but which sect of which religion should be combined with the state?
It's almost as if this idea of religious liberty is about freedom, right? And it's about the freedom to practice a religion or the freedom to not practice any religion. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in any of the religions, but I believe in religious liberty, right? Now in this case, I also want to give you a statement from founding father Thomas Jefferson. I don't know if Mandel's ever read any of this stuff, but it's relevant to the argument he's making here. This is Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptist Association, where he said the following. This is in 1802. Believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions, I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. Founding father Thomas Jefferson, right there.
Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, and James Madison framed the Constitution based on what Jefferson wrote for the Virginia Constitution. So if anyone would know whether there should be a wall between church and state, it would be Thomas Jefferson. And he said it in that direct quote. There should be a wall between church and state. How much clearer did he have to be? So by the way, does Josh Mandel know all this? He does. He went to Ohio State. He's got a lawyer's degree. He's not a dumb guy. He's basically saying to all my Jewish friends, to all my, if he has any Muslim or atheist friends, I doubt it given the next clip we're gonna show you, to everyone who believed in the United States Constitution, I don't care about you. I just wanna win. And I'm gonna appeal to these right wingers who wanna establish a theocracy. And my power and my greed is more important than any of you.
Right, and he went on to talk about how he wanted kids to learn about Christianity because it's better than Islam. Okay, and then later on he did double down by saying, shut down government schools and put schools in churches and synagogues. Oh, Okay, so basically get rid of public education, only have religious private education. But how about we keep public education the way it is, increase its funding, and for parents who want a religious education experience for their kids, go to a private school. But other than that, keep your damn religion out of our public institutions, including public schools.
When he says that we should basically exclude Muslims and atheists, that is the most un-American thing you could say, saying we should establish a religion and those guys aren't it. You're declaring yourself a bigot. There's no question about it. You just said it. All right, bonus episode for the members. You're gonna love it, tyt.com/join, including Trump's crying.
So a lot of progressive office holders are doing something fun. I like fun. They're doing the last 2 years in 2 minutes. Okay, we're gonna try it here. First, I wanna let you guys know about the years before that. Hey, remember we started the Just Democrats here on the Young Turks. It was officially launched on our air, basically by you guys. And then we featured AOC, we featured Cori Bush, and Ro Khanna became the first ever Just Democrat incumbent, all on the Young Turks. Now, the last 2 years have been a spectacular follow-up to that. So let's put the 2 minutes on the clock and do this. Young Turks got to start back in 2002, and I think we've been an important part of the progressive movement ever since. What we mainly do is amplify the progressive voice and candidates out there, and I think we've done a pretty good job.